So it does look like initially, guys, you can indeed turn one of these bikes like an actual motocross bike. Funnily enough, the KTM 450 EXC is not a motocross specific bike. It is actually going to be an enduro style bike. But for this video though, guys, I do want to take a look at the motocross class and or really dive deep into them. And the reason for that though is most likely going to come down to the amount of people I have been noticing not liking this class whatsoever, even including many YouTubers for that matter. So the big thing here, guys, is why is the class changed a bit from the Crew 2 and or what has really changed with it? I would have to say the biggest thing here is by far the way these bikes handle. So, for example, guys, on the Crew 2, they obviously were very, I guess you could say they had a lot of agility to them, and they did feel like you were basically riding like a 250-pound bike, and they actually felt like you could like fly around a corner and or like, I guess, like drag your foot on the ground and like slide around a berm with them or like jump in the air and whip them around. But on this game, they almost feel like you're riding like a 500-pound adventure bike and you're trying to like race them, and they really do not feel all that natural. Also, guys, 150 miles an hour on a motocross bike is legit non-existent. I really do think seeing that on a motocross bike is honestly slightly unnatural, and I would say many people are most likely going to be confused, but having these bikes do maybe 100 miles an hour, guys, I would say they're probably not going to feel all that fast at all. So for example, right now, if they did like 100 miles an hour, who actually wants to ride one of these bikes at this speed the entire time? I would basically say nobody for that matter. Also, it is finally raining in the game. Has anyone else noticed it basically never storms at all? And or like that crazy storm you actually need to do some of the challenges in the Electric Odyssey playlist. But overall, guys, I would say the biggest thing about these bikes is by far going to come down to the way that they do handle. Which, by the way, guys, I did want to spawn over to the small track area over here on, like, the side of the map. That way I can show this a bit more. And I would say the biggest issue with these bikes is by far going to come down to the fact that, well, they do not actually feel like you are riding a motocross bike at all. Like, I really do feel like I'm basically riding, like, a big adventure bike. They don't have that feeling of, like, the agility that a motocross bike would have, and or something even like how they were on the Crew 2. So I will definitely be jumping back onto that game here in a quick second to show you how those bikes actually rode and or the way that you actually could ride them around the tracks to really feel like you really are actually on like a racing bike like that. So that really is going to be a big difference with like the overall experience. And I would say the way these bikes actually feel are most likely going to be slightly backwards and most likely not in like the greatest way. Like you can't really pivot, turn, and or anything like that. So for example, braking here, a motocross bike can obviously turn on like a dime when hitting the brake, and or a way you can actually like dig into the ground and or turn them sharper. So these bikes literally, guys, hitting the rear brake here, that's pretty much, I guess, the closest thing you can get to one, which is kind of close. But I would say, guys, the biggest difference here is I really do feel like many of these bikes almost feel unnatural in a way. Like you really have to force them to really feel like they should. And to me, it almost feels like you're basically riding like your local Kenmore appliance from one of the Home Depots down the street. So that is obviously never going to be a fun experience whatsoever. Now, I would like to know your thoughts on these in the comments below, guys. Like, what are the biggest differences you have noticed with the motocross bikes, at least compared to before? And what are the biggest differences you would like to see with them? I would probably say there's going to be a lot of different answers with this. Like, to me, though, guys, I really do feel like these bikes feel way too similar to, like, a rally race style bike. Like, not only from, like, their overall speed, but they also feel like they almost handle the exact same. Now, jumping back on the Crew 2 here, guys, I have to admit the graphical differences on these games is honestly pretty insane. Like, jumping on this game than getting on the Crew Motorfest, you really do see a huge difference, like, overall. But this is one thing I did want to show, though, so I am using the exact same bike here. Now, check out this big difference, though, guys. So, immediately, the bike obviously can go back and forth. You also feel like you can jump it, and the bike actually feels like it moves a bit. Now, you obviously can't, like, whip this thing like it's a motocross game, but the whipping in this game, guys, is obviously not going to be perfect, but on Motorfest, you can barely even turn the bike in the air. Now, one of my favorite things about the Crew 2 is by far going to be the cornering of these bikes. Like, look how fast you can actually corner and or the way that they actually do feel when going around them. I would say that's going to be a huge highlight with how these bikes are. Like, for example, guys, that turn right there in that animation, you can't even do that in Motorfest. Like, for example, this right here, I did notice on that game, you definitely cannot turn the bikes like that. Funny how I crashed into the exact same rock again, but Overall, guys, I have to admit the bikes on the Crew 2 do actually feel better, and I would say the way that they do feel with their overall speed is obviously going to be the correct way. Funnily enough as well, the KTM EXC is going to be a 6-speed, so most motocross bikes, guys, if you are wondering, by the way, are indeed 5 speeds, which I would say having a 6-speed transmission in a motocross race is going to require you to shift way too much, so this is obviously going to be an enduro style of a bike, but definitely let me know what you guys think about the motocross bikes in Motorfest and how they actually are worse, and what are some of the main changes you guys would like to see on the motocross bikes in Motorfest to actually make them better. I really do feel like most of the feedback on them right now is definitely on the negative side, so I really would like to see some type of change with them, hopefully in the near future.